Kganyago has decided to keep rates on hold for now. Still with me is Mabyanine, Phiri, Chris Hart, and Clive Ramathibela Smith. I cut you off before we went to break.
Yeah, I think the difficulty that the Reserve Bank governor has is he's looking at monetary policy and he's speaking about externalities, and we think, okay, that's the Fed and, you know, what's happening in Europe and Japan, and that's true to a certain extent, but I think there's externalities to monetary policies that are also domestic specific, and he just threw in labour unrest. It was just a very, very brief thing, but he can't, as the Reserve Bank governor, he can't be seen to be trying to influence or direct, you know, domestic policy, because you're supposed to have a separation, but, you know, independence of the central bank, and that's I think mutual. But there are difficulties. Electricity you can't avoid. That's an enormous elephant in the room. But I think the budget spending, he's saying there's fiscal consolidation will occur, and he's saying, well, fiscal consolidation, when government expenditure is running at, is projected to rise at 7.9%, that's above wage increases, the actual wage settlements. And of course, wage settlements is an easy one to target, but of course, if you've got the productivity growth, you can have the wage settlements at that level. And so we need to appreciate that he's grappling with difficult issues that are, you could say, internal self-inflicted problems South Africa has, and that's a big theme that you're starting to hear, is that South Africa's problems are self-inflicted.
Yes. Chris, I want to stop you there. The corner of my eye behind you, I've got the dollar rand, and I've been seeing that sitting at 11 Rand 93. We were sitting at 11 Rand 86 before then. Is this a reaction to what happened now, or is just these are other external factors that are coming into play?
Well, I think it's very difficult to tell, but the rand did recover quite significantly after it went up to 12.50 against the dollar. So it's just been weakening, but I don't think there's a direct impact in terms of what we've just heard from the speech and what we're seeing in the markets currently.
You've got to see how it persists.
Yes. How closely do you think the Reserve Bank is going to be watching the movements of the rand? We know they're obviously watching inflation, but when it comes to the rand?
Yeah, I think, again, he did mention that there is upper risk when it comes to the inflation outlook, and that's definitely caused by the exchange rate. So they're definitely going to be keeping an eye on that.
Clive, when it comes to, again, these monetary policy moves that we're seeing from other central banks, you did talk about the ECB's quantitative easing that we've seen taking place. Also, just the different outlooks for the sectors. He spoke about banks. You again are for the consumer, so what do I do with this information here?
You take this information and you take it for what it is, and you literally want to apply it to the rest of the consumer market and think, is it going to create confidence, is it not? One of the biggest jobs, and I'm sure Chris will agree with me, that the central bank is supposed to do, or the MPC in this particular case, the Reserve Bank governor is supposed to do, is give confidence to all these agencies that the country's got itself under control. They know what they're doing. They know how to control monetary policy to make sure that the country is sustainable. And I felt today that I started a bit disappointed that, you know, I didn't get a sense that he's sending a message out to the likes of Jenna. You know, there's three women I fear the most in the world. One of them is obviously my wife.
I was about to say, that's going to come out somewhere.
And then you've got Christine Lagarde, and then you've got Janet Yellen. I don't want to talk about Angela Merkel because she's a different kind of canfish. So one of that is strong, that shows the stability and the actual policy-making strength of the Reserve Bank. I didn't sense that, and I think if I personally don't feel it, how is it that the consumer is going to feel confident themselves, you know, within that same context and in terms of what he said today?
You bring up an interesting point there, because if we are now looking at the different Reserve Bank governors, Lesetja Kganyago is now settling in. If we look at Tito Mboweni, he was known for tantalizing the market. And then we look at Jill Marcus. She was very down the middle, up and down, this is what you get. We heard what Clive has to say about his thoughts on our governor now. You?
Well, I suspect what you're going to see is a bit of volatility between statements. We first had raising, it's been an upward cycle, then we had a pause. Now we go back to hiking stance. We need to appreciate if the rand reaches its weakest point and starts to rate eases and the world goes into maybe greater risk off, for instance, and more central banks are cutting, and we're the odd one out, don't preclude that we actually shift to a cutting stance later this year. Okay, you can build a scenario around which this turns on its head and is cutting, and that's the problem I think Lesotho has, is that there's quite a bit of volatility in the data. So they're data dependent, but that data that's coming out is quite volatile. So you can just see the fuel price effect of the statement. So so bear that in mind, that it's a hiking stance for now. Probably we'll get a hike, maybe the next meeting, but it's possible that circumstances are no hikes, and by the end of the year we're back into a cutting stance.
So I'm going to start an informal poll here. We always have one in the newsroom. Chris, you said 25 basis points
next
up.
Meeting. Yeah, let's talk about the next week, because obviously I'm scenarios. I'm not necessarily talking about a forecast.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Let me come back to you, Mabyanine. We're talking about the different management styles for the central bank governors. So we've heard from Chris, so we've heard from Clive. What were your impressions of him?
Well, look, I think he's a pretty straightforward guy. Won't entertain much speculation, but I think I'll give him a bit more time to sort of assess what he's going to be like, and yeah, but seems to be pretty straightforward.
It's pretty straightforward. Just to know, as of course my informal poll, 25 basis points up next meeting. Where are you sitting?
I would have to agree as well. I think in the next meeting there's going to be a raise of about 25 basis points as well.
25 basis points. Are you not going to be controversial at all, Clive? Is there any scope for a cut at all?
No, there isn't, and
Okay.
that's why I believe that we'll keep the rates at 5.75 until the end of the year, because I don't see the US doing it. If you study the initial data that's coming out of there, it's still very stable, it still shows growth. So there's no really immediate panic to Janet Yellen. So that's why I reckon it will stay the same for the rest of the year.
Okay, so you say they're going to stay the same for the rest of the year.
Yeah.
At least we've got a little bit of disagreement. So both of you gentlemen on the outskirts are saying 25 basis points up. Clive, you saying we're going to remain unchanged. Just to recap some of the key things that came out of this, electricity constraints being one of the things that were mentioned a lot by the Reserve Bank Governor. He spoke about uncertainty, the global events, central bank movements, and in particular the normalization of interest rates by the US Federal Reserve, and of course the inflation outlook, wage negotiations that have kicked off, and how this is going to translate. Thank you so much for my guests for making the time to join us, and that's where we leave it today. Thanks to Mabyanine Phiri, he's a portfolio associate at ACM Gold at Investment Solutions, and Clive Ramathibela Smith, the investment specialist at Phiri Inc. Thank you so much for your time. After this, we'll be shifting our focus to the east of the continent, where Bonnie Tunya is standing by to tell you what has been driving East African markets.
Join us on a journey to an unexpected place where untapped potential thrives. With a culture that's fresh and dynamic, discover River State beyond its oil and gas potential. Rivers of Possibility takes a look at the development strides poised to inspire economic growth and development. Rivers of Possibility, every first Monday of the month, only on CNBC Africa.